So to start with this idea of nanotechnology in public, there's this implicit assumption that progress is automatically good, that science should be allowed to go forward as unhindered as possible, and perhaps these kind of public engagement activities are a way of enabling that to happen. There has been a lot of interest in understanding publics and how they do think about nanotechnology and how they might think about nanotechnology, because of course one of the big findings from this research is that most people haven't really heard of it. It's something that's very alien and very new. There is this idea that we can measure knowledge and perceptions and opinions to a certain extent, but behind that there's perhaps something more complicated going on. There's this sense of ambivalence and a sense of complexity. I suppose one of the things that I've been very interested in is getting behind that and looking at how that works in practice. How do people make choices about the pros and cons? And I've found that you often have to go beyond research methods that force people to give black and white responses. There's also issues around the fact that a lot of research has, and in fact the Davies project is in part guilty of this as well, a lot of research has tried to look at responses to nanotechnology as a kind of unified system. And of course it's not at all. Anyone who studies nano as it is enacted within science and industry knows that it's very diverse, and people construe it in different ways. It has very different applications which may have very different implications. And so how do you get at these things? How do you start to unpick the idea of an attitude or an opinion? How do you look in practice at how these things are formed within their social and cultural context? And I suppose the thing that I'm interested in is, as I mentioned at the very beginning, this idea that public talk in interaction might be one way of starting to get behind some of these results. What we in Durham were particularly interested in was lay people's ethics of technology. So the project as a whole was about the ethics of nanotechnology, but our focus was very much on lay constructions of that. So what we did was to use a focus group design to look at this in a bit of detail. And the result was this enormous tranche of transcribed talk, which I suppose the point of what I'm talking about is that you can look at that data in a number of ways. So you can look at it in terms of content, which has been done, for example, the studies based on deliberative events tends to do this. You get a list almost of concerns or anxieties or excitement. So the Deepen project data is really no different to previous work in terms of that you get concerns about consumer goods rather than more necessary developments, anxiety about things like surveillance and privacy invasion, concern about unexpected effects, so the risks of the technology, and also the idea that perhaps something is going on in terms of what it means to be human. It's also rather poignant, I think, often in how this is expressed, because it is an enormous dilemma in our everyday lives and practice. The things that we want perhaps aren't good for other people or for ourselves. And so this quote at the bottom, one woman was saying, "My little boy has got special needs, educational needs. If they've got this tablet now that will make him up to his peers and they'd say, 'Would you like it?' And I would say, 'Well, yeah, I would. Yeah, I would. I don't want him to go through life being different. There is nothing wrong with being different, but I just don't want him to feel the insecurities that I had. So you would do anything, but I still think it's wrong. I still think we are messing with nature.'" And that, I think, is really this idea in a nutshell, that things that are often perhaps good and desirable, that are good for the people that we love and for ourselves, there is still this hesitation about the broader effects and impacts that they might have. But I suppose the main point that I want to make is is just to emphasise how wonderful I think public talk is, and how rich the kind of data that you get from these kind of processes. And I think we have to just be very aware of that anything that seeks to look at public responses needs to be aware of this complexity and also of the perhaps specificity of national and cultural contexts.